All right. Good morning, everyone. With that, let's call the case of United States v. Karabassett to order. My name is Judge DeCamp. Again, I'll just go through the video spiel. Scoring judges, please look to the two buttons on the lower left of your screen. Please turn off your audio and video. These should remain off until the trial ends. You should also have your video set to hide all non-video participants. This means that the only people on the screen right now should be the advocates and me. With that, can the advocates please state their appearances?
Yes, Your Honor. Appearances from the government.
Please.
Good morning, Your Honor. My name is Connor Wright, and I represent the government in today's trial. I'm here today with my second chair, Ethan Wright. You will not be able to see or hear him, but he will be handling all the technology for my side of the case.
Thank you, Mr. Wright. Good morning. Defense?
Good morning, Your Honor. My name is Elena Young, and together with my second chair, Ms. Shelby Benak.
Good morning, Your Honor.
We represent my client, Ms. Karabassett.
Good morning to both of you. Thank you. Are there any housekeeping matters that the government would like to bring up now?
Yes, Your Honor, a couple. First, Your Honor, we'd like to invoke Rule 615 for the constructive sequestration of all witnesses save the defendant, Karabassett.
Any objection to that? That seems appropriate.
No objections, Your Honor.
Great. That's invoked.
Yes, Your Honor. Second, we'd like to invite your attention to Stipulation 7, which states that Exhibits 4 through 33 have been pre-admitted and can be offered at any time for any purpose in today's trial.
That's noted. Thank you, Mr. Wright. Anything further from the government?
With that, Your Honor, we're ready to go.
Sounds good. Anything from the defense?
The defense is ready to proceed, Your Honor.
Wonderful. With that, let's get into opening statements. We're now going to be hearing opening statements from both parties. Everyone should make sure they are now in speaker view. The button is in the upper right of your screen, and attorneys, please remember to mute your audio while the other advocate is speaking. Thank you all very much. I'm going to mute myself, and Mr. Wright, whenever you're ready to proceed with opening, please do.
Yes, Your Honor. She had a dream that she was willing to kill for. It's August 18th, 2017, just a little after 1 a.m. The defendant steps out of a white Chevy Express van. She can smell the sulfur and methane bubbling off the swamp. She thinks about the promises that Don made but never kept. She loads his body out onto a wheelchair. She finds a pool deep enough that no one will ever find the body. She tosses in his wallet, his phone, and a partially used syringe before she hurries back to the van. Just for a second, she pauses. She thinks about how she's been underestimated her entire life. She's done waiting for Don Clark to make her dream come true. Members of the jury, my name is Connor Wright, and I represent the government in today's trial. The government has charged the defendant with the murder of Don Clark. As the government, it's our job to prove to you, beyond a reasonable doubt, that the defendant killed her husband, Don Clark, unlawfully and with malice aforethought. Now, members of the jury, all that really means is that when the defendant acted, she got the intended results. She meant to kill Don. And to prove that to you today, we'll be calling the lead investigator in today's case, FBI agent Steph Branham, to the stand. Agent Branham is going to take you through his investigation, take you through her investigation, and show you the defendant's motive. You'll hear about a syringe filled with lethal chemicals. You'll hear about Mr. Clark running the park as a zoo, while the defendant wanted to run it as a sanctuary. You'll learn that Mr. Clark kept the animals in cages, allowed visitors to ride the elephants. Any animal exploit was fair game as long as it made Don Clark money. But that wasn't the defendant's dream. You see, the defendant wanted to run that same park as a sanctuary for the animals, allow them to roam free. And the two, they fought about this for years. Agent Branham will then take you through the evidence. I'll show you that syringe filled with lethal chemicals. I'll show you a rare strain of algae that she found on the defendant's boots, the underside of a park wheelchair, and in a white Chevy Express van. And we'll show you the GPS records for that van on August 18th. It'll show that that van went from the elephant park to the Big Gum Swamp, stayed there for 44 minutes in the middle of the night, and then was parked at the Belle Leon Airport. Members of the jury, throughout today's trial, I want you to pay special attention to what the defendant did the week that Dawn Clark went missing. Nothing. She didn't call him. She didn't text him. She didn't even report him missing for an entire week. That's because she knew where he was, at the bottom of the Big Gum Swamp, where she put him. At the end of today's trial, the evidence will be clear. Dawn Clark is not missing. He was murdered. I'm going to ask you to find the defendant guilty. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Wright. Ms. Young, whenever you're ready to proceed with your opening.
Yes, Your Honor. We simply don't know. August 18th, 2017, the last day Dawn Clark was seen. Since August 18th, nobody has seen or heard from Dawn Clark. Where is Dawn Clark? What happened to Dawn Clark? The answer is that we simply don't know. The government has charged my client, Ms. Kara Bassett, with murder. And as Mr. Wright just mentioned, it's the government that holds the burden of proof in today's case. They have to prove to you beyond a reasonable doubt that Ms. Bassett caused the death of her own husband, and that she did so with malice aforethought. The government will fail to meet their burden. Despite the government's contention that Ms. Bassett had a dream she was willing to kill for, the government will fail to prove that Dawn Clark is dead to begin with. Today, you're going to hear from Joe Young, producer of Ms. Bassett and Mr. Clark's Elephant Queen documentary. Ms. Young is going to tell you that of the many times she was at the Elephant Park to film, August 18th was one of those times. Ms. Young will tell you she was with Dawn Clark on August 18th that evening when he received a text that made his face turn white. You're going to learn that this text was actually from an unlisted number. Someone we simply don't know. Now, you're also going to learn about a woman named Lisa Clark, Dawn Clark's ex-wife. You'll learn that Lisa Clark was actually suing her ex-husband. You'll learn Lisa Clark was prone to outbursts and threats. You'll learn Lisa Clark called her ex-husband the day he went missing. You'll learn Lisa Clark refused to speak with the FBI. Now, members of the jury, throughout today's trial, I want you to keep three questions in mind. First, where is Dawn Clark? Second, who called Dawn Clark from an unlisted number the day he went missing? And third, where was Lisa Clark, Dawn Clark's ex-wife, the night he went missing? At the end of today's trial, I will come before you and ask for a verdict of not guilty, because the evidence will show there is only one answer to those three questions. We simply don't know. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Young. All right. Before the government calls its first witness, I will ask everyone to please switch to gallery view. And again, that button is in the upper right of your screen. This lets you see everyone at the same time. All right. Mr. Wright, do you have a witness to call at this time?
Yes, Your Honor, the government calls FBI agent Steph Branham to the stand.
You may proceed whenever you're ready.
Good morning, agent.
Good morning, sir.
Could you please introduce yourself to the members of the jury?
Yes, of course. Hello, everyone. My name is Special Agent Steph Branham.
What experience do you have in the field of the FBI?
I have about 18 years of experience. I'm a senior special agent. I've done over 100 investigations, including murder, serial murder, and robbery.
How are you involved in today's case?
I was the lead investigator into the disappearance of a Mr. Don Clark.
I want you to take the jury through your investigation. How did it start?
The defendant reported that her husband had been missing for a week. She found her husband's van at the Belle Leon Airport on August 25th, 2017. We started our investigation there.
What evidence did you find at the airport to assist in your investigation?
We found 3 pieces of key evidence at the airport. First, the van's onboard GPS system. Second, mud on the gas and brake pedals on the driver's side floorboard. And third, Mr. Clark's Cessna still in its hangar.
Let's start with the GPS system. Mr. Wright, could you put Exhibit 31 up on the screen for us? Agent, what did you learn from these GPS records?
Well, sir, the GPS indicates that the van left the Elephant Park at 11:17 on August 18th, 2017. It drove east for 139 miles to the Big Gum Swamp, arriving at 1:26 a.m. The vehicle was stationary for about 40 minutes, and it stayed there until 2:16. Then it headed back west and arrived at the Cary Belle Leon Airport at 4:19 a.m. on the 19th.
Agent, you mentioned that you found some mud on the gas and brake pedals of the van. How did that help in your investigation?
We sent these samples to the lab, and we found that it was a unique combination of algae. We took the samples from the Big Gum Swamp, and they were a match.
Did you find any other...
Objection, Your Honor. Improper opinion.
Could you please elaborate, Ms. Young?
Yes, Your Honor. This witness just testified that she concluded that the samples were a match. However, there's been no foundation laid as to how this witness herself discovered that the samples were a match.
Mr. Wright, please.
Yes, Your Honor. She testified that the lab tested these samples and found that they were a match. She's referring to Exhibit 5, which is already in evidence. It's already established that this witness gained that information from the lab using Exhibit 5, which is already in evidence.
Ms. Young, I'll give you the last word.
Yes, Your Honor. Although Exhibit 5 is already into evidence, this witness has not laid the foundation as to how she used Exhibit 5 to come to that conclusion that the samples were a match.
Sure. Mr. Wright, I don't dispute you on the fact that this witness is familiar and that she did rely on it in some way, but I do agree with Ms. Young to the extent that I don't know if that's yet on the record.
Yes, Your Honor.
So please just lay a little bit of foundation and then we'll just move on from there. Thank you all.
Agent Branham, you mentioned that you found that from the lab. What exhibit are you referring to?
Referring to Exhibit 5. This is the forensics report detailing all of the physical evidence that we sent to the lab for testing.
During your investigation, did you find any other traces of this rare strain of algae?
Yes, sir, we did. We found that same combination on the underside of one of the wheelchairs at Miss Bassett's Elephant Park and on the defendant's boots.
Was there any other physical evidence that you collected from the park?
Yes, sir. We discovered at the park stored vials of carfentanil. It's a Schedule II controlled substance, but at the park it was used as an elephant tranquilizer.
So why did you collect the elephant tranquilizer?
They're lethal to humans. The park kept meticulous records, and the logbook said there should be 24 vials, but when me and my team searched, we found that one was missing.
Objection, Your Honor. Lack of personal knowledge. May I explain?
Please.
Once again, Your Honor, although exhibits are pre-admitted into evidence, this witness is testifying to carfentanil being a lethal substance without laying the foundation as to how she knows this.
Mr. Wright?
Your Honor, it's our understanding of the stipulation 7 that we read onto the record that exhibits 4 through 33 are pre-admitted and can be offered at any time for any purpose, including referencing the exhibits in trial today. We're referencing exhibits that are already in evidence, and she's laying the foundation by stating that she discovered this at the park.
Ms. Young, I'll give you the last word.
Yes, Your Honor. Once again, although we did agree that the exhibits 4 through 33 are pre-admitted into evidence and may be used, this witness did not refer to any specific exhibit as to how she knows that carfentanil is a lethal substance.
I tend to agree with Ms. Young there. Again, I don't dispute that this is information that the witness has. Again, I would just like that foundation on the record to the extent that she knows how she knows that this is a deadly substance.
Yes, Your Honor.
Sustained.
Agent Branham, you mentioned that it was a deadly substance. How did you come up with this information?
Well, sir, during our investigation, we found a safety sheet. This safety sheet detailed all of the side effects and the danger of carfentanil, and we noted that it was lethal if 1 milligram was injected or ingested.
You also mentioned that you found a logbook where they would keep meticulous records of these syringes. Could you tell the members of the jury where you found that?
Yes, sir, we found this in the shed with the carfentanil syringes.
Now, Agent Branham, you mentioned that Mr. Clark's plane was still in its hangar. Why did you find that significant?
Well, we had learned that it was well known Mr. Clark would often fly to Costa Rica using that private plane. Considering the van's trip to the swamp in the middle of the night and the algae in the swamp being matched to the sample from the wheelchair and the missing tranquilizer, me and my team began to suspect foul play.
Well, you say foul play. What do you mean foul play?
We began investigating the possibility that someone at the park had harmed Mr. Clark and staged it to look like a disappearance.
So where did your investigation go from there?
We started looking into who might have had motive to harm Mr. Clark. While interviewing the defendant, we found evidence that the defendant and Mr. Clark had been fighting about the elephant park for years.
What specifically did they fight about?
The defendant indicated to us that it was always her dream to have an elephant sanctuary, not a zoo, and Mr. Clark refused to convert the zoo into the sanctuary that the defendant wanted.
Agent Branham, during your investigation, did you find any evidence that these disagreements ever turned physical?
We found a restraining order filed by Mr. Clark against the defendant in June of 2017.
Oh, Agent, you said that the defendant and Mr. Clark fought about the park for years. Did you find any evidence to explain why the defendant would choose to act in August of 2017?
We found a power of attorney signed by Don Clark on May 1st, 2017. This gave the defendant control of Mr. Clark's assets if he were to become incapacitated, die, or disappear.
And what was the approximate value of Mr. Clark's assets?
Between the financial portfolio, the vehicles, the properties, the defendant stood to gain $8 million.
And you mentioned that that power of attorney that you investigated had a disappearance clause. Are you aware of whose idea the disappearance clause was?
Yes, sir. According to Mr. Clark's attorney, this was the defendant's idea. She insisted.
Objection, Your Honor. Hearsay.
Your Honor, may I be heard?
Please.
The defense waived their right to object to this testimony during the pretrial hearing. This exhibit's already in evidence. She's referring to the letter she received from Mandy Tuminelli.
Ms. Young, that seems compelling, but I'll give you the last word here.
Once again, Your Honor, although these exhibits are pre-admitted, this witness indicated no exhibit that she was referring to. All that this witness said was that from Mr. Clark's attorney, she had learned.
Your Honor, may I be heard?
No, Mr. Wright, I think she may have you on a technicality there. I think if you can just rephrase the question and answer such that we know that this information is coming from an exhibit that is admitted, then we're all square.
Yes, Your Honor.
So to that extent, sustained.
Agent Branham, you mentioned that you found this information from Mr. Clark's attorney. Are you aware of what document that was?
Yes, sir. This was an email that I received from Mr. Clark's attorney. I believe I provided it as Exhibit 4.
Now, Mr. Wright, could you please display for the jury Exhibit 22? the defendant's phone records. Agent Branham, you said Don Clark went missing on August 18th. After he disappeared, how many phone calls did the defendant make to him?
None.
How many text messages did the defendant make to him?
None.
Did the defendant call the police the day that Don Clark disappeared?
No, sir, she didn't.
What about the next day?
No, sir, not then either.
When did the defendant call the police?
The defendant called the police 7 days after Mr. Clark's disappearance.
Thank you, Agent. No further questions, Your Honor.
Thank you, Mr. Wright. Cross-examination, Ms. Young?
Yes, Your Honor.
Please proceed whenever you're ready.
Good morning, Agent Branham.
Good morning.
I want to talk about some evidence that you found in your investigation. I'm showing you what's been pre-admitted as Exhibit 19. You recognize this? Do you recognize this document, Agent Branham?
Yes, this is the logbook that I used as part of my investigation.
You're aware this logbook has 4 signatures on it, right?
Yes, ma'am, I am.
You're also aware that 12 different people had access to those tranquilizers?
Yes, ma'am, I am.
Now, that GPS history that you just testified to on direct examination, it doesn't tell you who drove the van on August 18th, correct?
No, ma'am, it doesn't. It just tells me where the van was at the time.
I'm now showing you what's been pre-admitted as Exhibit 5. You recognize this document?
Yes, ma'am, this is the forensics report that I used.
Now, based on the report, those samples that you found in the park van and on Miss Bassett's boots, you didn't compare them to watering holes at the elephant park, correct?
Once the samples matched from the Big Gum Swamp, we didn't need to test anywhere else.
Well, let's be clear, Agent Branham. Those samples weren't an exact match to Big Gum Swamp, were they?
Due to the unusual combination of algae, we determined that it was so extremely close, we didn't need to test anywhere else. But no, we didn't test any other samples.
And to be clear, the exact wording of that report is likely but not certain.
Ma'am, you can't be 100% certain with any forensics, but this was as close as we could get.
Well, now let's talk about your search for Don Clark. You searched the elephant park?
Yes, I did.
You searched every building?
Yes, we searched the elephant park to the best of our ability.
You found no signs of blood?
No, no signs of blood, violence, or break-in.
You did not find Don Clark at that elephant park, true?
No, ma'am.
You searched the local airport?
Yes, ma'am.
You searched the van that you talked about at the airport?
Yes, ma'am, we did.
You did not find Don Clark in that van?
No, ma'am, we did not.
You didn't find Don Clark at the airport at all, true?
That's true. We concluded that he was killed at the Big Gum Swamp. That's where we determined his body was.
Well, Agent Branham, you went to Big Gum Swamp, right?
Yes, me and my team canvassed it to the best of our ability.
You actually gave search dogs Don Clark's scent.
Yes, ma'am, we did.
You did not find Don Clark at the swamp, true?
No, ma'am. The swamp was 13,000 acres and it was dangerous at some times, but we did our best.
Well, that's a yes to my question that you didn't find Don Clark at the Big Gum Swamp.
That's correct.
Throughout your entire investigation, you never found Don Clark, correct?
That's correct, ma'am.
I'm now showing you what's been pre-admitted as Exhibit 21. You recognize this document?
Yes, ma'am. This is a phone record that I utilized.
These are Don Clark's phone records.
Yes.
These records show that on August 18th, Don Clark called an unlisted number from Costa Rica.
Yes, ma'am, that's correct.
You don't know who this number belongs to, correct?
Due to the fact that it's unlisted, no, ma'am. We were never able to identify this caller.
The records also show that Don Clark received a call from Lisa Clark.
Yes, ma'am, that's correct.
You're aware Lisa Clark is Don Clark's ex-wife?
Yes, ma'am, I am.
I'm now showing you what's been pre-admitted as Exhibit 4. You recognize this document?
Yes, I do.
This is that email that you received from Mr. Clark's attorney?
Yes, it is.
From this letter, you learned that Lisa Clark was suing Don Clark.
Yes, ma'am, that's correct.
From this letter, you learned that Lisa Clark was prone to outbursts and threats.
Yes, ma'am, that's correct.
You didn't interview Lisa Clark, did you?
Ma'am, she refused to meet with me She refused to meet with me for an interview, which is her right as a U.S. citizen.
So Lisa Clark refused to speak with the FBI, correct?
That's correct.
So you don't know where Lisa Clark was on August 18th?
No, ma'am, but I noted in my report that she lives in Orlando, which is very far from Tallahassee.
Well, Agent Branham, I'd like to direct you back to my question. You don't know where Lisa Clark was on August 18th,
No, ma'am, I don't.
the night her ex-husband went missing.
That's correct.
Thank you. No further questions, Your Honor.
Thank you very much, Ms. Young. Mr. Wright, do you have a redirect?
Yes, Your Honor.
Please proceed.
Agent Branham, opposing counsel asked you some questions about the Big Gum Swamp. To your knowledge, are there alligators at the Big Gum Swamp?
Yes, sir. There were alligators in the swamp.
How large is that swamp?
The swamp is 13,000 acres, and in miles, that's about 20 square miles.
Thank you, Agent. Nothing further, Your Honor.
Ms. Young, you are permitted a recross if you would like one.
No recross, Your Honor.
Thank you. You are excused. Appreciate your testimony. All right. Anything further from the government at this time?
No, Your Honor, the government rests.
Thank you, Mr. Wright. Ms. Young, do you have a witness you'd like to present?
Yes, Your Honor. The defense calls Joe Young to the stand.
Thank you. And please proceed whenever you're ready.
Good morning. Could you please introduce yourself to the court?
Hey there, I'm Joseph Young, but you can just call me Joe.
What do you do for a living?
I'm a television producer. I mostly work on nature documentaries, so you've probably seen my footage on Animal Planet, Planet Earth, you name it.
How are you involved in today's case?
All I know is that I was asked here to come and testify.
Miss Young, do you know Kara Bassett?
Yeah, absolutely.
How do you know Miss Bassett?
Kara reached out to me, I think it was 2015. She wanted me to film a documentary about her called Elephant Queen.
Did you normally go to the elephant park to film this documentary?
Yes, all the time. I was there for probably around 8 or 10 hours, 5 days a week.
And what did you normally film?
My job was to film everyone and everything. So the elephants, guests, employees, and especially Dawn and Kara.
Who is Dawn?
Dawn, that is Kara Bassett's ex-husband. They live together on the park.
Did you ever see Mr. Clark and Miss Bassett interact?
Yeah, all the time. My job was to follow them around pretty much all day.
Well, from your perspective, how would you describe their relationship?
Dawn and Kara were a loving, affectionate couple. I mean, they had their disagreements, every couple does, but no matter what happened, I would see them teasing on each other and doting.
Were you ever with just Mr. Clark?
Yeah, every day for about 2 years.
Do you remember if you were with Mr. Clark on August 18th, 2017?
August 18th? Yeah, that was the night he disappeared. I was with him, I think around 6 p.m.
Miss Young, I'm showing you what's been pre-admitted as Exhibit 21. You recognize this document?
Yes, I was shown this on a TV interview. It looks like Don Clark's phone records.
I want to turn your attention specifically to page 2. Could you read who the registered owner was from those 2 texts on August 18th?
Yeah, it says here it was an unknown number from San Jose, Costa Rica.
Now, you mentioned that you were with Don Clark that day towards the evening. Do you remember Mr. Clark looking down at his phone?
Yeah, I had this weird conversation with him. I was talking to him about all this awesome footage I'd gotten from the park that day. And then all of a sudden, he looked down at his phone and his face just went white. As a producer, I see everything in these shots, and I just remember that shot of Don's white face. He looked terrified.
Was that the last time you saw Don Clark?
It was. That's the last image I have of him, that white face on his look.
Miss Young, what, if anything, did you do after seeing Don Clark that day?
Well, I was leaving for Mexico that day to get some footage, so I hopped on a plane.
And when did you return from Mexico?
About 1 week later, I think, around the 25th of August.
When you did return to Mexico, did you ever go back to the elephant park?
Yes, I did. We continued to film the documentary.
What type of film did you get following Mr. Clark's disappearance?
We actually committed one episode just to Don Clark's disappearance, so I was filming for that.
What did you do for this episode?
I flew down to Costa Rica. I wanted to see if I could find any signs of life from Don.
Did you find any signs of life?
Yeah, actually. I went to his house at Hermosa Beach, and the place was absolutely spotless, not a speck of dust anywhere. And then the fan was left on, and I also saw Don's clothes hung up in the closet all neatly.
Did you show the footage from this episode to the FBI?
I didn't. I would have. I thought it was great footage, but they never asked.
Miss Young, how many hours of footage total do you have from that documentary?
Oh, geez, probably around 2,000 hours. I could release more seasons than Grey's Anatomy with that stuff.
Did you tell the FBI any of this in your interview?
I never got interviewed.
Thank you. No further questions, Your Honor.
Thank you, Ms. Young. Mr. Wright, cross-examination.
Yes, Your Honor.
Please proceed whenever you're ready.
Good morning, Miss Young.
Good morning.
Now, you've been working at that elephant park since 2015, am I right?
Yes, that's right.
So you're familiar with the elephant tranquilizers they use on site, isn't that true?
I am. I've seen them.
Mr. Wright, could you put Exhibit 18 up on the screen? Now, this is one of those carfentanil tranquilizer syringes, right?
I think it was on there. I'm not sure what's on there now, but I did see it. Yeah. Yes, that is it.
Now, you're aware that the staff was required to keep meticulous records when they use these syringes. Isn't that true?
Yeah, I believe they were. I think there was a logbook.
Right. The defendant even told the staff that the park could get in trouble if they did not keep perfect records. Right?
Yeah, that's right.
I want to talk about the defendant's dream of having an elephant sanctuary. Now, the defendant has been talking about this for years. Isn't that true?
She has. She was really excited about it.
In fact, back in 2015, she told you that someday the park would be the largest elephant sanctuary in the United States.
Yeah, that's right.
Mr. Clark, he refused to run the park as a sanctuary. Isn't that right?
For that time, yeah, but he said he would eventually turn it into one just like Kara wanted.
But Mr. Clark never did.
Not at that time, no. But
Mr. Clark never even tried to turn the park into a sanctuary.
I didn't see him try. I don't know what happened when I wasn't there, though.
So from what you could tell, you never saw Mr. Clark make an effort to run the park as a sanctuary, right?
I don't think so, no.
Because he ran the park as a zoo.
Yes, he did.
You fought with the defendant about how the park was to be run. Isn't that true?
Sometimes, yeah.
So I want to talk about some of the footage you captured on June 15th, 2017. You're familiar with exhibits 36 and 38. Isn't that true?
I am. I filmed those videos.
You're on a permission to show this witness exhibit 36 and 38 outside the presence of the jury.
Sure, that's appropriate.
One moment. I apologize.
Oh, I'm steaming. This is a business, not a charity. As long as it's my money, we'll run it that way. That's what Don said to me. Can you believe that? We'll see how this ends.
Miss Young, that's Exhibit 36, and it's fair and accurate, right?
Yes, it is.
Now let's show Exhibit 38 outside the presence of the jury.
People look at me and they think I'm sweet and nice. Go on. Keep underestimating me. I will lobby senators. I will protest big businesses. I will get in your face. I will take people to their grave if I have to. I will do anything to protect these elephants.
And that's Exhibit 38, isn't that true?
That is Exhibit 38.
It's fair and accurate?
Yeah, it seemed to be.
Your Honor, the government moves Exhibits 36 and 38 into evidence.
Ms. Young, any objections?
No objections to Exhibit 38, Your Honor, but hearsay as to Exhibit 36. May I explain?
Please.
Specifically, Don Clark's statements that Ms. Bassett is referring to.
Your Honor
Okay.
may be heard.
Please.
Your Honor, we're not offering this for the truth of the matter asserted, but for the effect it had on the listener in this case, Kara Bassett, the defendant.
Could you remind me of what Don's statement is and what you are purporting the effect to be?
Yes, Your Honor. Don said, this is a business, not a charity. As long as it's my money, we'll run the park the way I want to. The effect this has on the listener, Kara Bassett, is it is inflaming Kara Bassett, giving her a motivation to kill Don Clark.
Ms. Young, I'll give you the last word. Thank you, Mr. Wright.
Your Honor, we would ask for a limiting instruction for the jury to only take Don Clark's statements, not for the truth, but for the effect on Ms. Bassett.
Sure. I will give that limiting instruction to the jury at the appropriate time. Thank you both for a well-argued objection.
Yes, Your Honor. Now, permission to constructively publish 36 and 38 to the jury?
Please. Sure.
Now, Ms. Young, you witnessed these arguments several times, right?
Yeah, I did sometimes. Look, Kara called herself the Elephant Queen. We called her the Drama Queen.
Is it your testimony that it was only sometimes and not several times?
No, I agreed. It was several times.
Okay. Well, just a few weeks before Mr. Clark's disappearance, you witnessed one fight between the defendant and Mr. Clark, didn't you?
I did, yes.
Let's talk about that. During that fight, the defendant wanted Mr. Clark to turn the park into a sanctuary like normal, right?
That's what she said.
Mr. Clark refused. True?
That's right.
The defendant, she grabbed a vase and she threw it at Mr. Clark's head. Isn't that true?
Objection, Your Honor. Inadmissible character evidence.
Please elaborate, Ms. Young.
Your Honor, opposing counsel is trying to say that because Ms. Bassett threw a vase at her husband on a month or less before August 18th, that she would have the propensity to act violent towards him on August 18th, 2017.
Mr. Wright, are you offering it for propensity purposes or another purpose under 404?
Under 404B2, Your Honor, we're offering this for intent.
Okay, please elaborate on that.
Yes, Your Honor, this shows the intentions that Kara Bassett, the defendant, had to murder her husband, Don Clark, not for propensity purposes, but under that exception for intent.
Sure. I'll do what I did last time, Ms. Young, and I'll give a limiting instruction at the appropriate time to say that they can only consider it for that purpose and not for propensity. So overruled, and please move on. Thank you.
Yes, Your Honor. Mr. Clark, he disappeared in August of 2017, right?
Yeah, he did after I saw him with that terrified look.
Ms. Young, you mentioned on direct that you went out looking for him. Isn't that true?
I did about a year later.
You went to his house in Costa Rica. Isn't that right?
I did, at Hermosa Beach.
You snuck in through his window, right?
That's right.
And on direct, you testified, you said that you found signs of life. I want to talk about that. You get into his house and you see that all the lights are off. True?
Yeah, lights off and a fan on.
But all the lights were off.
Yep.
You go to the fridge and it's empty. Isn't that true?
Yeah, that is true.
No toiletries in the bathroom?
No toiletries, but his clothing was there.
His clothing was in the bathroom?
No, his clothing was at the house.
So you found no toiletries in the bathroom.
No toiletries.
You looked on the table, you didn't see any personal items on the table?
Not that I remember now.
Miss Young, you stayed there for a full week, isn't that true?
Yeah, that's right.
You didn't see anyone enter his house, did you?
No, no one entered the house.
You didn't see anyone leave the house for that full week.
That's right.
Thank you, Miss Young. No further questions, Your Honor.
Ms. Young, do you have a redirect?
Yes, Your Honor.
Please proceed.
Ms. Young, it was brought up on cross-examination that you've witnessed fights between Ms. Bassett and Mr. Clark. Have you ever seen Ms. Bassett physically abuse Mr. Clark?
No, never. That wasn't in her nature. I spent 5 years with her.
Have you ever seen Ms. Bassett threaten Mr. Clark?
No, never.
Thank you. No further questions, Your Honor.
Mr. Wright, if you said something, it was kind of garbled. Did you say something?
I apologize, Your Honor. My microphone's above me. I objected to character evidence.
Okay. Ms. Young, why don't we take a step back and pretend that we're still on the record with this witness then so that he can get his objection out. Please, Mr. Wright, what's your objection?
Character evidence as to them offering this statement from Miss Young to prove the defendant's character.
Okay. Ms. Young, are you offering this for propensity purposes or another under 404?
Your Honor, pursuant to Rule 404-2A, defendant may offer evidence of the defendant's pertinent trait, and if the evidence is admitted, the prosecutor may offer evidence to rebut it. Your Honor, this evidence is admissible.
Mr. Wright.
Your Honor, we do not believe it meets that 404B exception. We believe that they're offering this for propensity purposes, and it would be inadmissible character evidence.
So at this point, it seems the two of you are arguing two different rules. She seems to be saying, Ms. Young, and correct me if I'm wrong, that this is admissible under 404A2. And Mr. Wright, your argument seems to fall under 404B. Hers has to do more with a criminal defendant's character being relevant. Mr. Wright, do you have any response in terms of the 404A2 objection?
Your Honor, if they're offering this for propensity purposes, we would stand by our argument that this is inadmissible character evidence.
Mr. Wright, thank you. Your objection is overruled. And I think with that, there was nothing further for this witness?
Yes, Your Honor.
Okay.
At this time, the defense rests.
Just a moment there. Mr. Wright, you are permitted a recross if you would like one.
No recross, Your Honor.
Great. Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Young. I appreciate your testimony. And the other Ms. Young, you just said that the defense rests, right?
Yes, Your Honor.
Great. Are you two both ready for closings?
We would like one moment to fix the microphone situation, Your Honor.
Yeah, why don't you take 90 seconds?
Yes, Your Honor.
And folks, while we're just kind of waiting for the mic situation to be fixed, at this time, probably a good time to go ahead and switch to speaker view. We're going to be hearing closing arguments from both parties. Everyone, please switch to speaker view. And since this is for the scorers, since both witnesses have completed their testimony, please, in this brief break, take the time to complete the witness portion of your ballot. Thank you. And we'll just give it another 15 seconds, Mr. Wright.
Yes, Your Honor. Before proceeding, can everyone see and hear me all right?
I can.
Yes, Your Honor. May I proceed?
Yes, whenever you're ready.
The defendant had a dream that she was willing to kill for. August 25th, 2017. Just 1 week since Dawn Clark went missing. The defendant is conflicted. Is it safe to call the police? Has she been able to thoroughly cover all of her tracks? She's already got her cover story. Mr. Clark, he must have gone to Costa Rica. But is that enough? The defendant looks out at the park and imagines what it'll be like when she finally has her sanctuary. This is her dream. And Dawn Clark paid for it with his life. Members of the jury, today the evidence has proven that on August 18th, 2017, the defendant murdered her husband. Her motive was clear. Years of fighting with Dawn Clark on how to run the property had taken its toll. The defendant wanted to run that park as a sanctuary. But you heard today what Mr. Clark wanted. It was his money, and as long as it was his money, they'd have to run the property the way he wanted. You heard about that power of attorney document today. That was signed just 2 months before Mr. Clark disappeared. The defendant finally had a way to make her dream come true. And you learned how she did it through the testimony of FBI senior agent Steph Brennan. Carfentanil, Exhibit 18. An elephant tranquilizer that is lethal to humans. Stored in syringes at the park. Once Dawn Clark was injected, all the defendant had to do was load his body and dump it. Just not too close to the park. So she drives 2 hours, 140 miles to the Big Gum Swamp. Members of the jury, we showed you those GPS records. Those GPS records indicating that van was at the swamp. 13,000 acres of alligator-infested Florida swamp. They'll never find the body. But getting away with murder, it's not as easy as they make it seem on TV. And the defendant made some mistakes. Let's start with the algae. Today, the defendant may have noticed that while there was mud on the driver's side, gas and brake pedals of the van, she lives and works at an elephant park. Mud is to be expected. But what the defendant didn't foresee was the rare combination of algae. Algae present on her boots, algae present on the wheelchair, algae present in the van. Members of the jury, the carfentanil. You remember the testimony of Joe Young, the defense's only witness. She told you that the staff at the park, they kept meticulous records in their logbook. And the logbook says there should be 24 syringes. But when the FBI got there and they counted and they recounted, they only found 23, indicating that one of those syringes went missing. Now, when you go into deliberations, I challenge you to take a look at Exhibit 19. This is a record of those syringes. You saw the defense bring it up today in trial. Go through and look every single time you see the initial CC. That stands for Kara Clark, the defendant in this case. Every single time she put her name on that record, she indicated which elephant it was for. What about in August of 2017? She never indicated which elephant it was for. She didn't use it on an elephant, she used it to kill her husband. Members of the jury, finally the phone records. No text message asking, hey, where are you? It's been 2 days since I've heard from you. No text message, 4 days. It's been 4 days and you haven't reached out. Where are you? I'm worried. No text message, 7 days. 1 full week. No text message. She doesn't even reach out to Dawn Clark. She doesn't even reach out to the police because she's covering her tracks. She knows he cannot answer because she knows where he is. The bottom of the Big Gum Swamp where she left him. Members of the jury, today the government has met the burden of proof. We ask you to find the defendant guilty. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Wright. Ms. Young, you can provide your summation whenever you're ready.
Yes, Your Honor. We simply don't know. Members of the jury, today the government has tried to make today's case clear and straightforward. They've tried to paint a picture that Miss Bassett had a dream she was willing to kill for. But the evidence the government brought forward today left us with unanswered questions. Because we simply don't know. The government has charged my client, Miss Kara Bassett, with murder. And as I mentioned in opening statement, it was the government that held the burden of proof in today's case. They had to prove to you beyond a reasonable doubt that Miss Bassett caused the death of her own husband and that she did so with malice aforethought. Members of the jury, the government has failed to meet their burden. They failed to prove that Don Clark is dead to begin with. But even if you do believe he is, they have certainly failed to prove it was Miss Bassett that killed him. Now, at the beginning of today's trial, I asked you to keep 3 questions in mind. I want to go through those one by one. First, where is Don Clark? Members of the jury, let's get to the point. At the beginning of cross-examination, Agent Branham admitted they never found Don Clark. Now, the government would like you to believe that it was Miss Bassett that killed her husband because of mud that they found in a park van and on Miss Bassett's work boots. But they didn't compare these samples they found to watering holes at the elephant park. They didn't compare these samples to anywhere but Big Gum Swamp. Members of the jury, we can't say definitively where those samples came from if they have nothing else to base it off of. Reasonable doubt. Now, Mr. Wright just showed you the park logbook of the missing tranquilizer and how Miss Bassett was the last employee to use it. But we also heard today that 12 people had access to those tranquilizers. Why would Miss Bassett purposely be the last one to log usage of that tranquilizer if she had planned on taking one? Members of the jury, we don't know what happened to Don Clark. We don't even know where he is. And that is reasonable doubt. So the second question. Who called Don Clark from an unlisted number in Costa Rica the day he went missing? Now, if we look at Exhibit 21, we see that Mr. Clark received 2 texts on August 18th from an unlisted number, translating to "call me immediately." We see that immediately after Mr. Clark called this same unlisted number. Now, today you heard from Joe Young that she was with Don Clark that day when he received those texts that made his face turn white. We don't know who this number belongs to. The FBI doesn't know who this number belongs to. They never tried to investigate to find out who this number belongs to. Reasonable doubt. So we're left with a third question. Where was Lisa Clark, Don Clark's ex-wife, the night he went missing? Now, we heard today on Exhibit 4 that Lisa Clark was suing her ex-husband, that Lisa Clark was prone to outbursts and threats. But the FBI didn't interview Lisa Clark. Lisa Clark refused to speak with the FBI. Members of the jury, you refuse to speak when you have something to hide. We don't know where Lisa Clark was on the night her ex-husband went missing. Reasonable doubt. Members of the jury, I want to remind you of the government's burden in today's case. To meet their burden, it wasn't that they had to prove Miss Bassett was probably guilty. It wasn't that they had to prove that Miss Bassett was guilty by a preponderance of the evidence, meaning more likely than not. It wasn't even that they had to prove Miss Bassett, there was clear and convincing evidence that Miss Bassett committed this crime. To meet their burden, they had to prove to you beyond a reasonable doubt that Miss Bassett and only Miss Bassett could have committed this crime. The highest burden in our legal system. And they have failed to do so. Because unanswered questions is reasonable doubt. Those 3 questions I ask you to keep in mind throughout the entire trial, they were never answered. We ask that you find Miss Bassett not guilty. Because simply not knowing is not proof beyond a reasonable doubt. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Young. Mr. Wright, do you have a rebuttal you would like to present?
Yes, Your Honor.
Please proceed.
We simply don't know. Members of the jury, I want you to recall the testimony of Jo Young on direct examination today. Jo Young took the stand and she told you they had their disagreements, just like every other couple. They were normal. What did she tell you on cross-examination? The defendant took a vase and threw it at Don Clark's head. Just a few weeks later, Don Clark disappears. Members of the jury, we know what happened. You saw those GPS records. We know the path the defendant took. Members of the jury, I want you to pay special attention to jury instruction number 4 in this case. Jury instruction number 4, it says that you can rely on circumstantial evidence in coming to your conclusion in this case. That is so important today, members of the jury, because in today's case, we have the evidence, we have the motive, we have the intentions the defendant had to kill her husband. I want you to look through all the evidence and take another look, because we certainly do know. We know that Don Clark was killed by the defendant. I ask you find the defendant guilty of murder. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Wright. To both advocates. At this time, judges, please complete your ballots and press submit. Then I'll ask everyone to stay on until we've gotten the all clear. And then we're going to go ahead and do a few comments for everyone.